Hello and welcome to CSTW's Writers Talk. I'm Doug Dangler. Today I'm speaking with Julia Keller. She is formerly of the Columbus Dispatch and is now a feature writer and cultural critic for the Chicago Tribune. Her account of the April 2004 tornadoes in Utica, Illinois won her the 2005 Pulitzer Prize for feature writing. Her most recently published book is 2008's Mr. Gatling's Terrible Marvel, The Gun That Changed Everything and the Misunderstood Genius Who Invented It, which is now in paperback. And she is an unrepentant English major, collecting 3 degrees in English, culminating in a doctoral degree from The Ohio State University. Welcome back to Columbus, and welcome to Writers Talk.
Thank you so much, Doug. Great to be here.
Great. Well, let's talk about Mr. Gatling's Terrible Marvel a little bit. It seems like you were drawn to this project by what you write of as the quintessentially 19th century character and personality of Mr. Gatling, as well as his underdog status as someone who's fallen into relative obscurity from being very famous at the time of the invention. Was this something you started off knowing and feeling, or did that evolve with the project?
It really evolved. I began just with a fascination with his life. I was researching another project. I came across the story of his life. I have no particular feelings for guns or armaments history and no particular knowledge of it, but his story was just so captivating to me the more I read about him. And like any good English major, I looked around for the definitive biography on Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com. There wasn't one, to my astonishment. Here was a person who had created, by all accounts, the world's first machine gun that actually worked, introduced during the Civil War, and I thought surely a person of this great accomplishment, there'd be a major biography, and there wasn't. His papers are spread all over the place. So the more I read about him, the more I became interested in him, and the more his life story seemed to me to be a perfect prism through which to look at the 19th century, and that would in turn answer a question that I've always had, which is, how in the world did we do it? How did the United States become this economic and military and cultural powerhouse when by the mid part of the 19th century, we were just coming out of a terrible civil war that left us in tatters? How in the world, in just a few short decades, did we rise to be this great powerhouse, this great superpower, and the light of the world?
Mm-hmm. And I think, not to give too much away about the book, but one answer you give to that is the patent system.
Yes.
And I'm curious how you saw that evolving throughout the book, and you give such great value to it.
Oh, I fell in love with the patent system. In fact, the former Columbus Dispatch book critic, a friend of mine, Bill Eichenberger, when he was talking with me about the book, he said, couldn't this really be subtitled The Patent Office? More fascinating than you ever knew. And it's true. It's one of these things where, again, I started from a position of total ignorance, which maybe that blank slate is the best way to begin anything, because then you still have the enthusiasm you had as a child the first time you see a butterfly, I think. I followed the history of the Patent Office and really became convinced that it's the key to our economic success in the 19th century, and indeed throughout the 20th. Our patent system was the envy of the world. It was unique in the history of the world. The founders are justly praised for a lot of things, but to my mind, the thing they did that was most prescient and most brilliant was our patent system. We had a patent system before we had a 13th state. Our patent system that George Washington and even Thomas Jefferson, who, as you know, was very conflicted about patents, still he knew that the way to get people to invent, the way to unleash that incredible creative potential and ingenuity in any people is to give them economic incentive. In other countries of the world and throughout history, you had to have a lot of money and be wealthy and well-connected to get a patent. It would take years and years to get a patent bill through Parliament in Britain, for instance. Along comes the United States and they say, come to Washington, plunk down at that time a nominal fee, $5 maybe, and there's your patent. There was a panel of patent advisors, and they generally would say, go for it. And out came this magnificent outpouring of creative machinery and ideas, and the safety pin and the ice cream churn and the steam locomotive and the cotton gin and the telephone and the telegraph and the Gatling gun. Gatling was one of these people that did that. He was from a small family, a small town in North Carolina, 16 years old. He has an idea for a new propeller, a screw propeller. He gets on his horse, he rides to Washington, D.C., walks up the steps to the patent office. I mean, it's almost unimaginable today because of our bureaucracies and all of this in place. But at that time, that's what you could do. And he had over 50 patents in his lifetime, many more than just this gun. This is the one for which he's known. But another reason, of course, why he is a perfect emblem is because of his use of the patent system and getting a patent as the driving engine of his life, and indeed, I would say, the driving engine of what made this country great.
Although the screw propeller, he was a few minutes too late.
He was too late, and almost literally minutes. You're quite right. He was very, very close. John Ericsson, the great Swedish inventor, had gotten there just a bit ahead of him, and the patent examiners had to say, to their regret, to young Mr. Gatling, again, 16 years old, they had to say to him, sorry, we just issued a patent for this. And the screw propeller is, of course, still the means by which marine vessels are propelled today.
Okay. Although I doubt Mr. Ericsson's family is still getting the royalties off of it, unlike, say, Disney, that has the perpetual patent system, which is an interesting thing. As I was reading this, I kept reflecting back on a lot of more current uses of patent, or sort of have turned back against what they might have been in the 19th
Well, there is that
century.
argument that the patents have outlived their usefulness and now are mainly used by large companies like the Microsofts and the Disneys and all that to discourage potential and innovation, to kind of keep away. I mean, if you or I had a new idea for an operating system for a computer, for instance, we would have to have an army of lawyers to match the armies of lawyers that were hired by existing companies. I mean, that's quite right. It's always a balance, though, between wanting to encourage innovation but not to encourage monopolies, which sometimes happens. But there was a great story that the Toledo Blade did a couple of years ago that I reference in my notes at the back of the book that traced Ohio's economic decline, for instance, to the decline in the number of patents issued to Ohioans. And there's almost a direct correlation. If you want to look at what's happened to the United States, you can look at the decline in patents, and they use Ohio as a microcosm for that. And it's the connection there is I think too prominent to be ignored and dismissed.
What were some of your aha moments when you were writing this book? You said you started out with a blank slate. Where were the moments that you were really surprised?
I would say surprised and delighted. One of the great delights is, as you know, from when you're doing archival research, you're going back to the original sources, that there was so much of Gatling. We have so many of his papers, a lot of business papers, personal effects, personal letters. A big moment for me was when I discovered the small notebook. It's a small leather notebook that he had kept, obviously in his own handwriting, by pencil, in 1848. He was a medical student at the University of Cincinnati Medical School. At that time, it was called the Ohio Medical College. Gatling, one of the first things he invented was a plow, a new kind of plow. He was very successful with it. This is in the 1840s. To sell it, he went around on steamboats across the Ohio River or the Mississippi, contracted smallpox, which was a terrible scourge at that time. Because of that near-death experience, he decided he wanted to go to medical school. He was still a very young man. He'd had some sisters die quite young. So he enrolls at the Ohio Medical College. We have very little information about his time there. We do know he didn't graduate, but at that time, not graduating was not a big deal. Unlike now, there was no way to Google anyone and see if they actually got that sheepskin. So he went to medical school. I was doing some research at East Carolina University, and they have everything just kind of jumbled together. It's not very well cataloged yet because, frankly, no one really cares that much. Upended an envelope, and out comes this little leather booklet that he had kept, like a little leather journal, we would call it today. I open it up, and there's his signature, R.J. Gatling, 1848. And just that feeling of holding in your hand something from that long ago. And at that point, so little did he know about his own destiny or the destiny of the country, and you just kind of get that tingly feeling that every researcher knows, indeed every student knows, when you come across something like that sort of brings the world of the past before you in all of its richness and mystery.
Were you able to glean a lot of extra things out of that book, or is it the physical artifact that was
Well,
most
both. Actually, in his note taking. I mean, I think the way one takes notes tells you a lot about the person. He was a meticulous note taker, but then, like a lot of us, at some point his mind would begin to wander, and you can kind of see where the pencil would and then would come a little doodling, and then he'd practice his signature, and so it's like R.J. Gatling, just like the rest of us, you know, on a hot afternoon, sitting there in class.